Hi YouTube, welcome back to my channel, True Crime Revealed. Today's story takes place in the year of 2008 in Greenville, South Carolina. It involves murdered and dismembered victim, 34-year-old Nicole Harris. Now, Nicole is a classic example of being in the wrong place at the wrong time, at the hands of a crazy, vindictive, and deranged couple who is upset that their ex-lover in a three-way relationship no longer wanted to be involved with them. They took it upon themselves to not only kill Nicole, but to dismember her body and send the body parts as a message to their ex-lover. So it's a very crazy and twisted story. Local media, as far as South Carolina, did a lot of coverage, but outside of that, there wasn't a lot of coverage on it. It was on a few reenactment crime shows, like on Investigation Discovery, and I was an actress in one of those shows, so that's how I was able to learn a little bit more about the case. And I figured, hey, I would tell you guys more about the case because I think it's a case a lot of people have not really heard about. So today we're going to talk about the events that led up to the murder itself, as well as the findings after the murder took place. If you like the video, please like, comment, and subscribe, and let's get started.
Hey guys, welcome back to True Crime Revealed. Today we are going to talk about the unfortunate tragic murder of Nicole Harris. Now, she is pictured to the right of the screen, and the couple that you see above is Clarence and Carman Jenkins, and these two are vicious. And you're going to figure out and learn a little bit more as to why I say that in this case. But it is a very tragic case. It was very uncalled for simply because she was in the wrong place at the wrong time at the hands of these monsters. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and get started on the murder of Nicole Harris. Perhaps one of the most horrific and gruesome murders in Greenville, South Carolina's most recent history is a case involving 34-year-old Nicole Harris. Now, the home that you see on my screen is the home of Sue Bostick, who is a relative of Grace, and in front of her home on a porch, there was a bag with body parts. It actually had a severed hand and a severed foot and lots of different toes that were collected in this bag in a pool of blood. Now, Sue Bostick is ultimately the individual who calls 911 to report this mysterious bag that she has found on her porch. And in Greenville, across the town, there is another bag and threatening note left outside of an apartment. And the woman, when she comes home, is with her niece and nephew, and she discovers that there is also a bag with the hand, the foot, and the cut off toes. And Sue Bostick contacts police, lets them know that she doesn't understand why this bag is in front of her home, why this threatening letter is there, and investigators begin right off the bat trying to figure out who the severed limbs belong to and ultimately who did this as well. Sadly, it is discovered that the body parts belong to 34-year-old Greenville, South Carolina native Nicole Harris. Nicole was described as being very sweet and loving. She had a heart of gold, and she was just a really kind person. This is Nicole Harris's mother, Jessie Harris, and she had 7 children. And Nicole was actually the baby of the 7 children. They called her Mickey, and her mother loved her very much, despite her kind of taking the wrong direction and making some wrong choices. She was very proud of her daughter because she had a great heart. On the screen pictured is her sister, who was instrumental in the case, and her sister was very, very distraught about her sister's passing. She also said that her sister had a heart of gold, loved her very much, and said that she raised her growing up. This is one of Nicole Harris's children, her son. He also loved his mother very much. The murder actually affected him for a really long time. And he was one of four children that Mekole Harris had. But because of drug addiction and making wrong choices, she was actually living on the street. She did not have custody of her children. And in a lot of times, if she wasn't living on the street, she was living with different people, just basically struggling with addiction, struggling to make ends meet. But lo and behold, many times she stated that she was really trying to get her life back together. She missed her children. She wanted to make things right and be a mother for them. And unfortunately, her life was cut short by the hands of an awful couple, which we're going to discuss here shortly. Now, Nicole had gotten in trouble with the law, in and out of trouble a few times. This is how investigators were actually able to identify who she was because of her fingerprints. So that was, I guess, the only positive, so that she wasn't a Jane Doe. But she was in and out of trouble. She was down on her luck and just didn't really make the best choices despite having a heart of gold and being a really sweet person. She just struggled with addiction and was a lot of times homeless and living on the streets if she didn't have anyone that she was staying with. And because she had a pure heart despite getting into trouble, it actually was the end of her because she ended up trusting someone and believing someone too much, and this led to her demise in the end. On April 7th, 2008, the bags are found at the home of the mother and the aunt of a woman named Grace Davis. Now, Grace Davis is going to be extremely instrumental in this case because she is the reason that the crazy couple was so deranged and was trying to get her back and went to great lengths in trying to murder someone. Now, remember, I said that there was a letter found at both sites where these two locations of the bags of body parts were found, and they were addressed both to the same person, Grace Davis. Grace Davis is the daughter of one of the location homeowners and the aunt of the apartment home of the two places where the bag of body parts are found. The threatening note addressed to Grace states, "Grace, this is your last warning. This is what happens to people who do not follow instructions. Unlike them, you had protection and you left it. The next time this will be," and they blur it out because it states Grace's son, who they're trying to protect here in this letter as far as investigators are concerned, because he's a minor. "Don't forget you have no way of protecting them, and Grace's son is giving you and to us. Email us with your answer at evans.john60@yahoo.com by April 9th, 2008. So they're not giving her a long time. They're giving her about 2 days to whoever this Grace Davis is. And investigators are very concerned because they have to, of course, identify who the body parts belong to, Nicole Harris, and they also have to figure out who is Grace Davis. Why does this person have an interest in her? Right? They refer to themselves as this organization and they want Grace Davis to return or else. So investigators know that Grace is actually in trouble and they need to figure out who did this. Is this a serial killer? Are there other victims? How are we going to go ahead and get Grace and rescue her before they try to do this to her as well? So it's a very bizarre case. You've got cut off limbs in black bags at this young woman's mother and aunt's home. You've got threatening notes stating that she needs to come back to this quote unquote organization. So, very, very, very strange. Now, in this letter that is threatening Grace Davis, they are stating that she owes them money in the sum of $10,000 and that they need their money and they need for her to return ASAP or else she will not only be hurt, but also her older son. So, this quote unquote organization, this group of murderers, whoever they are very, very crazy, very deranged. However, they're very direct in what they're stating to her. They're not afraid to leave these bags of body parts on Grace's mother's and Grace's aunt's property. And investigators, when they locate the bag and they see the hand and foot, they immediately know that it is a homicide case and that this person is not alive anywhere, because for the hand to be cut off the way that it was and the foot to be cut off the way that it was, that person would bleed out in minutes and would be dead. So they know right off the bat that this is, in fact, a homicide, and they need to try to figure out the body location and also who Grace Davis is. In their investigations, investigators actually learn that Grace Davis has absolutely no connection to Mekole Harris. A friend of hers, actually, which was a tip, led them to the friend of Grace Davis's where she was actually staying unharmed, and they were actually able to interview her and find out who this quote unquote organization was. But in discussing Grace with Grace's mother and aunt, investigators learned that Grace is actually a mother as well, and she actually left her abusive husband, Willie Davis. So she was married to Willie Davis for a while. He wasn't paying child support like he should. He was abusive to her, and she basically fled and left with her children and was staying with family for a little bit and was kind of down on her luck as well. Not as much as Nicole Harris was, but pretty close, just because she didn't really have anywhere to stay. She was ultimately going to almost lose custody of her children if she didn't get it together as far as living conditions and being able to financially support them. So investigators were actually able to learn a lot about Grace Davis's home and family life, and that she basically didn't have a lot of money to her name, and there was a specific couple that took her in under their wings. Now, this couple who took her under their quote unquote wings, and I say that very sarcastically because Grace would have been better off never dealing with them, never having them help her out, and Nicole may very well still be alive today. But this couple that you see on my screen, Clarence Jenkins and Carman Jenkins, are a match made in hell. And they are the monsters, the organization, the vicious animals who murder Nicole Harris because they want Grace Davis back. And you may be wondering, what do I mean by they want her back? Well, the three of them were involved in a three-way menage a trois relationship, if you will. And when Grace decided that she had to go, it was no longer for her, she needed to focus more on trying to get custody of her children back. These fools didn't want to hear it and decided to take matters into their own hands to scare the living hell out of Grace by murdering someone else and sending the body parts to her to threaten Grace Davis. So we're going to get more into that here in a little bit, but I do want to just briefly discuss how this couple met, the dynamics of their relationship, how Grace enters it, and then in the end, how Mekole Harris dies. This is Carmen Jenkins as a small child on my screen, and she was born in 1987, also lived in the Greenville, South Carolina area, and she was a straight A student. She had a very bright future ahead of her, and her mother and brother state in other documentaries that I've watched for research purposes that they never expected her to be in jail or prison or to commit any types of crimes of this magnitude up till murder. Her mother stated that she adopted her when she was 3 days old and she raised her to be a Christian. She was very fun loving and respectable. She was an usher in the church. She sang in choir and had a really bright future ahead of her. She is credited to help raising her brother, making sure that he stayed out of trouble, and she went off to college but came back because her mother had gotten sick at the time and she wanted to make sure that she was there to help her mother. So she was a really, really sweet girl, a good student overall until she met the likes of Clarence Jenkins. Now, Clarence didn't have as much of a bright future and a positive history and past as Carmen did. He had more of a sordid past. He actually was a petty criminal. A lot of people described him as being a petty criminal. He wasn't the sharpest tool in the shed and worked a lot of temp jobs, specifically in construction. He was, however, street smart. So even though he wasn't really book smart and didn't have a lot of degrees under his belt and wasn't really a college student and all of that, he had a lot of street smarts. And he admitted to Carmen when he met her that he had a bad past. And Carmen, being the nurturing one, the loving one, remember, she helped raise her brother. She made sure that he stayed out of trouble. She wanted to help Clarence. And she actually invites him to church because she wants him to hear about God, learn about Christianity, so that he can turn his life around. Now, things are pretty innocent in the beginning, mainly on Carmen's end, but Clarence, of course, is street smart. He has a way with knowing about the world and the way things work, and he's very attracted to Carmen. He finds that she's very cute. He wasted no time contacting her and making the moves so that they could start dating and having sex. And he is actually Carmen's first sexual experience. And after messing around after some time, Carmen finds herself pregnant by Clarence and he marries her. So he tries to do the right thing by her. They get married, and things seem to be okay at first, but then Grace is going to enter the situation, and that's when things get very, very sticky. So Grace Davis meets Carmen Jenkins and Clarence Jenkins. She thinks that they are this God fearing Christian couple that also have small children. So remember, when they got married, Carmen was 19 and Clarence was 23. So they're a young couple. They have a couple of small children. So does Grace. And they are, quote unquote, kind enough to take Grace into their home because she's down on her luck and she is also struggling like Mekole was. And at first, things are great. They are kind of like a little family. When Carmen is at work, Grace will watch their smaller, younger children for Clarence and Carmen, and she'll do little duties around the house and just ultimately keep Carmen company. And old habits, of course, with Clarence, he ends up getting arrested and has to do 90 days in jail. And he is not at the home. So Grace and Carmen get really cozy and they actually start a love affair between the two women and they become very, very close. They have a lot of sexual tension, but also they are really good friends because they're there for each other. If Carmen came home after having a tough day at work, Grace would say, "Tell me about it. How was your day? I'm going to make it better for you." So you could say that Grace and Carmen fall in love with each other. They help each other out with their kids around the house, and they're just keeping themselves company until Clarence gets back home. Now, when Clarence gets back home and he sees Carmen and Grace involved with each other sexually and romantically, at first he's shocked. He can't believe it. He isn't really upset, but he's just more so surprised because he probably did not know that Carmen had those lesbian tendencies. And he ultimately kind of figures out, hey, I'm missing out. I'm going to take advantage of this. I've got these two beautiful ladies. I'm the man of the house. We're going to have a threesome. So they begin having a threesome together and they form a little marriage union, if you will. They actually take vows, they write these vows down on paper, and they begin a highly sexual tension relationship in the trailer that they're living in together. And they basically love each other. And Grace is all for it until she figures out that she's going to possibly lose her children. And that's when the fun and games are over, the party's over. She chooses her children as any respectable mother would over this love triangle relationship because she wants to get her children back once given the opportunity. And Clarence is livid. He wants her back. He is not taking no for an answer. He feels betrayed. He feels that he helped her when she was down on her luck, and this is how he is repaid. And he's not having it. So remember, he's street smart, petty crimes, in and out of jail. He decides that he's going to make things right at the hands of an innocent victim, Nicole Harris. Now, Clarence was a day worker in construction, and Nicole was also trying to find work daily. And remember, a lot of times she was living on the streets and was homeless, didn't have a lot of money to her name. So, unfortunately, it was the perfect storm that she would actually meet Clarence at a temp agency called Labor Finders. In this particular office, this is where Nicole meets Clarence. They both are there trying to find work, and she is seen sitting in his lap, really cozy, and they actually end up making out. One of the secretaries at the temp agency witnessed that Clarence and Nicole went into the bathroom together, and it is assumed that they actually slept together. Now, Clarence, being the conniving guy that he is, actually has a pair of handcuffs and a badge, and he knows that Nicole is into drugs and is doing drugs, and he pulls out the handcuffs and the bag and the badge after they basically are sleeping together and we're cozy together. And he tells her that he is an undercover drug enforcement officer and that he is going to take her into the police station. And she's terrified. She really believes that he is who he says he is. After all, she really is on drugs and she is nervous that, hey, I guess I've been caught. So he takes her back to his trailer where his wife Carmen is, and she really believes that, oh, this is a police officer until she gets there and she realizes that no, he was not a police officer at all, and he's actually there to kill her. So, back at the home, Clarence and Carmen decide that they are going to murder Nicole to send a death threat to Grace to make sure that she comes back to the quote unquote organization, which in fact is the marriage between the three of them. And Clarence tells Carmen, you need to go in the room. You need to strangle her. So they had a coaxial cable. And he says, you're going to strangle her to death. I'm not going to do it. You're going to do it. And Carmen is so afraid. She's never done anything like this before. She's never killed anyone and she's crying. She doesn't want to do it. And he says, you better do it or I'm going to hurt you. So she feels like she has no other choice but to do it. She takes the coaxial cable and she starts strangling Nicole. And throughout this ordeal, what they do is they end up contacting Grace's mother and leaving voice messages of Nicole screaming and crying, basically stating, this is your fault. You come back or she dies. You come back or this happens to you. And so that's where police are able to identify that her mother and aunt get these weird phone calls. Grace and her mother and aunt get these weird phone calls, and it's actually Clarence and Carmen calling, and it's Nicole basically screaming for her life, deathly afraid. And in the process, Carman is taking this coaxial cable and is strangling Mekole to death. And it's difficult for her to do it because she's not strong enough. And Mekole is fighting back. She's a fighter. She fought for her life. And Carman tells Clarence, I cannot do this. I am not physically strong enough. I'm not mentally strong enough. I can't kill her. And he says, you know what? I'll deal with it. I'll handle it. So he takes a bag and he puts the bag over Mekole's head to cut off her hair supply. And he also strangles her with the coaxial cable until she finally passes away. After she passes away and Clarence realizes that he has successfully murdered Mekole, they then decide that they want to send body parts to Grace to threaten and scare her into coming back to the organization, which is their menage a trois three-way marriage that they had set up. Now, they try to find some knives and they try to cut her leg or her feet, hands and toes, but they realize that the knife is actually not big enough or strong enough for them to get through that layer of bone and skin and muscles. It is so gruesome and graphic. And they see some garden shears in the home. And that is what they use in the end to actually cut Mekole's hands off, to cut her feet and the digits of her toes, put them in two separate bags. One that's going to go to Grace's mother's home, the other is going to go to Grace's aunt's home. They also set up letters that they type up and they put an email address that links them back to the Greenville City Library, which is where they actually type up the letters and they create an email address for Grace to respond to. And they give her like 2 or 3 days to respond, something really crazy. And this is how the police are able to figure out where the email address for the IP address came from. Again, Clarence is not the sharpest tool. He's not book smart. He doesn't realize that just because you go to a library, it's a public library, and you're using a computer that's not yours, that you're not really leaving your name tied to it. There is surveillance camera that catches them leaving the library, entering the library, and he actually had Carman go there every day to check the email to make sure if Grace had written them back. So the email address found on the letter addressed to Grace Davis was ideal in them figuring out the IP address, getting surveillance footage of how Clarence and Carman would go to the library to create the letters, the email address, and check in and see if Grace had been replying back. Also, the testimony of Grace, how she described this family as being a church like, kind family that took her in, but did not like the fact that she left. They were able to start piecing together what happened in the death of Mekole Harris. Now, when investigators get a tip as to where Clarence and Carman live in the trailer, they actually go to the trailer to confront them and to talk to them about what was going on. And Carman comes to the door and she says something to the effect of, well, we're really busy right now, but I promise we will go down to the station later. Just give me some time to talk to my husband and we'll make our way down there. And she closes the door. The investigators leave the trailer, and Clarence and Carmen think that they're gone. And not even about 5 to 10 minutes later, again, not the sharpest tool in the shed, Clarence, he tells his wife that they need to remove some of the evidence in the trailer that they had been using. So they bring out a couple of big black trash bags that investigators are actually watching. They have their home with surveillance, but Clarence and Carmen have no idea that the home is under surveillance. And they see that the big black bags that they're bringing out actually have blood on the handles. And Clarence and Carmen dump this in the dumpster and they go back to their home. And the detectives then at that point retrieve the dumpster items. It's 2 bags, and they realize that they have bleach inside. So investigators surmise that the bleach that they've disposed of is most likely what they've used to clean up blood in killing and dismembering Mekole Harris. At this point, they realize that they need to get a warrant to search the home. They are able to do so because Clarence has a very sordid past, and they're able to retrieve a warrant to go to the home to try and find more evidence and arrest Clarence and Carman. Detectives come back to the home, and lo and behold, Carmen is there. She opens the door, and they say, "We need to speak with Clarence," because they have a warrant out for his arrest because of all of his petty crimes. And it wasn't really difficult for them to get a warrant from him just because his criminal history was so lengthy. She then says, "He's not here. I'm here by myself." The detective calls her bluff. He says, "I'm coming in right now, whether or not you let me in or not. And if I find him in there, we're charging you with harboring a fugitive." So she then gets scared. She moves to the side. And at that point, detectives have access to the home. And what they find is an absolute, literal house of horrors. So investigators enter the trailer of Clarence and Carmen, and they are immediately caught with the attention of how filthy the home is. It is described that they were very dirty, very messy. There were pots and pans that had mold all over them, and it was apparent that the bleach that they used was not used for cleaning the house because it was disgusting, filthy, and it looked like they had not cleaned up in a long time in that house or trailer. So they surmised that the bleach was definitely, in fact, used to clean up evidence of the murder of Mekole Harris. The home was described as having bugs everywhere, filth, dirt. The floor was actually covered in debris and food items, mold everywhere. Just really a disgusting living situation, especially considering that they had small children that were living there. And it was no wonder why Grace got out of there, because the authorities stated if she was going to stay living in that house, she could not have her children because it was just basically uninhabitable for small children. Just really disgusting. What was even more bizarre was that the shower that Carmen and Clarence had in their trailer was actually spray painted red. And it just looked odd because it seemed like it was spray painted for no other reason besides trying to hide blood. And sure enough, when they discovered the shower drain, they were able to find that there were, in fact, actual traces of blood in the drain. And their forensic team is able to do a quick test to see if it is, in fact, human blood. And of course, it turns out that it is human blood. There was also blood spatter all over the shower drain and some on the wall as well. So they tried to do as best as they could to clean up as much evidence as they could, but there's always a little bit blood left, and they were able to figure out this was Mekole Harris's blood. Amongst the filth, the spray paint, and the blood in the home, they find more evidence as they're scoping the house out. They do find that there is a knife, and they find all types of other sharp objects that they decipher were used to cut up Mekole. So remember, they used the garden tools, but they also found knives as well that they used to try to cut her before they were able to find the garden snippers. And also they found a pair of handcuffs that was also used to bring Mekole back. So all of the evidence around the house was just glaring, and the two of them did not do a really good job as to cleaning it up. The final damning piece of evidence is that investigators find a clipboard in the trailer that actually had a stack of letters that were addressed to Grace Davis. So these were their drafts, if you will, on the clipboard. So again, not very smart, not the brightest bulbs, the two of them. Why would you have a clipboard with the actual letters addressed to Grace that were found at the crime scene with the body parts in the bag of Mekole? So just really damning evidence that was basically laced all over the house that really helped build investigators' case against both Carmen and Clarence Jenkins. As they are scoping the house for more evidence, one of the investigators goes into a room and he sees drywall out of the wall, basically cut out. He finds that a little bit odd. He shines his light into this cutout, and lo and behold, there is Clarence Jenkins hiding out the whole time. They basically tell him to get out, have him put his hands behind his head, and they arrest him for the murder of Mekole Harris. So Carman knew he was here the whole time. He was hiding out, hoping, I guess, that investigators would leave and not find him. But he was not so lucky. Thank goodness they were able to find and arrest him right there on the spot. So the couple is taken into custody and they are starting to be questioned as to what the heck happened to Mekole Harris. Why are you sending these threatening letters to Grace? And Carmen is very, very cooperative with them. It's actually based on her testimony that they're actually able to get Clarence in the end. And she basically tells them everything about the three-way relationship with Grace, the fact that Clarence went crazy when Grace left, found Mekole, and basically wanted Carmen to kill Mekole. In the end, when she was unable to kill her successfully, he went ahead and finished the job and then cut her body up and sent Mekole's limbs to Grace's family to scare her. So, because of her testimony, they actually are able to reduce her sentence. She was originally sentenced to 50 years in prison, Miss Carman Jenkins, but because of her testimony and cooperating so much with investigators, they did a hearing for her and they were actually able to shorten her term down to 40 years. Now, Clarence, on the other hand, was not at all concerned about Carmen's testimony against him. His defense attorneys and he decided that because the evidence was found in the trailer that they both shared, they could actually pin it on Carmen. And they painted this ridiculous story that it was all Carmen's idea because Carmen was upset that Grace left her, and she was very jealous that Clarence and Mekole were having a sexual relationship. So she basically took it upon herself to kill Mekole, to get back at her for sleeping with her husband, and took it upon herself to take the limbs of the body parts and to scare Grace into coming back. Now, because of Carmen's testimony, which was a lot stronger than Clarence, the actual evidence that they found, and because they were able to interview Grace Davis as well. Clarence was actually the fall guy in this case, as he should be. He was the mastermind. He was the one that caused Mekole Harris to take her last breath when she died. Carmen actually did have a little bit of redemption in this story. She actually tells investigators where Clarence dumped the body in a remote field. So they were able to actually locate the rest of Mekole's body in a remote field where Clarence dumped her. So investigators find her body and her remains, and they see that she was actually charred. So he actually lit her body on fire, the remainder of it, and she was laid to rest by the Jenkins in this field. And investigators are actually able to retrieve her body for further purposes of the investigation, and her family in the end was able to give her a proper burial. In the end, the star key witness in all of this is Carman Jenkins, who has to testify against her quote unquote love of her life, her husband. She tells investigators that she was deathly afraid of her husband. He was basically threatening that he would hurt her if she did not go along with it, and she basically feared for her life. And that is why she helped him through this, but she really didn't want to do this. She was very afraid, but he was very threatening and borderline abusive to her. So she just went along with it so that she would be okay and her children would be okay. So this, in fact, granted her less time in prison. She only received 40 years, unlike her husband. Clarence ends up receiving life in prison without the possibility of parole, which is exactly what he deserves. He deserves to rot in a prison cell behind bars for what he did to this woman. She did not deserve it. She had nothing to do with their crazy love triangle. And he basically thought that because Nicole had a life and history of addiction and was living on the streets and was in and out of trouble, that no one would miss her, no one would care, and she was just a casualty that just happened to be available to his devices, and no one's going to miss or care about her. So I'll just use her to the best of my abilities in murdering her to get what I want, which is for my lover to come back. I mean, it's absolutely sick and ridiculous and twisted, and I'm so happy that he got life in prison without parole. And I think that Carmen got exactly what she deserved as well. I'm happy that in the end she did end up confessing and telling them what happened, but she knew that her husband was crazy and she was there aiding him in this madness, so she deserves to spend some time behind bars as well. Nicole Harris did not deserve this. She is survived by her family, friends, loved ones, and her children who mourn her. And so that is the story, guys. The murder of Nicole Harris. It is a very sad and tragic story. It should have never happened. It is definitely a senseless and heinous crime. This woman had absolutely nothing to do with this three-way love triangle affair. She was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Because of her addiction, she really thought that she was in trouble and that her time was up and that an undercover drug enforcement officer was taking her to jail. She was actually trying to get her life back together so that she can get custody of her children. And once again, her life was snuffed at the age of 34, gone way too soon. I am so saddened by many stories like these where these people are trying to get their lives back together and they don't even have an opportunity to, because there are predators, monsters, killers out there who will do anything for their own selfish agenda and means. And it is a very sad and tragic story. I wanted to share her story with you guys. It's one that a lot of people may not have heard of unless they are, of course, from the South Carolina area. So, guys, tell me in the comments, have you heard of this story before? What do you think of it? And just let me know of any other stories that you guys have thought of or would like for me to cover. I'll do some research on those as well. I know that there have been a few requests, and I have not forgotten about you guys. I'm just doing the research and trying to get videos together for you all. So that is the video. If you guys like the video, please like, please comment, please subscribe. I appreciate all of you, and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye now.